for mechacha obi biara ebe imu me de ensem enampa ensem de ebi ewo ho sabe yensem no yemonra ensem no emu.
And that's Akwasi, and the Viking story that we know. The same Chinese company owns Akroma and things like that. So it's not surprising that it takes you a long time. Why? The fundamental principle is that you need to aggregate the mine to an optimal size. If you don't have enough resource, you don't build a big mine there to mine and raise a lot of money to mine. It doesn't make sense. And that is partly the reason why, and obviously the infrastructure that you need in order to establish that you have a significant mine is why and Planet itself, in its own statements, in its own submissions to the arbitration process in London, which I'll get to in a minute, in its own declamations in court in Ghana in relation to this issue, have made it very clear that this is a very politicized project. If you read the statement that they issued when I started commenting about this subject, they were very clear that it's the Minerals Commission itself that have given them a no objection letter to go ahead and take over the mine. Is the Minerals Commission a private organization? It's a state institution.
Correct.
On top of that, they've made it very clear that they will go ahead and acquire the mine, whether or not the shareholders agree. We will come to that in a minute. Now, if you live in a country where expropriation is not in our laws, we don't allow expropriation without compensation, except under very, very, very well-defined, on very well-defined grounds. For a private company to declare that because they have a no objection letter from the Minerals Commission, they will go ahead and do a transaction without the involvement of their shareholder, tells you that there's a political undertone. Because why would the government give them that no objection letter in the face of these disputes? All of that, therefore, means that it was very important that the fact that the ECOWAS Bank had come in, the ECOWAS Bank board chair is a Ghanaian. He has a history of working in the Ghanaian public sector. He used to be at ARB Apex quite a while ago. The current rotating chair of governors is our own finance minister, joined just a few months ago, took over just a few months ago. All the board members are his colleague politicians in the region. All the board of directors of the ECOWAS Bank are civil servants under the control of politicians. ECOWAS Bank does not have an independent governance body, an ombudsman like you see in other multilateral development banks that I can go and complain to if I have an issue. If I have an issue with the World Bank, there's the IEG group. We've been doing all manner of reviews about World Bank projects in Ghana, and I've written extensively, probably the person who has written the most about World Bank projects in a single country in the world. But we have information from every World Bank project because that's a requirement. ECOWAS Bank doesn't have that. So there's a lot of transparency issues when it comes to ECOWAS Bank and such a transaction. Therefore, we have an interest to make sure that underneath it, there aren't any political problems or political influence, etc. And that is why I got involved. So having explained in great detail why I got involved, we now get to some issues around the ECOWAS Bank decision to enter. ECOWAS Bank was entering, and I knew this for a fact, when it already had a history with the project. When in May 2024, it had given a term sheet. A term sheet is simply a high-level offer through EMP, which had then arrived at Azuma Resources, which owned the asset, offering to put money into the mine. And the shareholders of Azuma Resources had looked carefully at what had been offered and said it doesn't meet the terms of the agreement. So ECOWAS Bank had then gone and refined it the next month and brought another offer back, and the company had said no. So there was a history between this bank and this project. That's very important to bear in mind. We also know that long after that, and just before these matters exploded into public limelight, and when this company, the shareholders, got wind of what was happening, they had written to ECOWAS Bank, telling ECOWAS Bank that they are not involved in any transaction and the rest of it. Now, if you have such live disputes, you have a history with the project and understand, therefore, that there is concern about the shareholders. You've dealt with shareholders telling you no before. Then you go behind them, work with the one trying to acquire the mine, fly into Ghana, stage a champagne-fueled event, issue public statements of your support, and then declare that the board of directors has approved the loan. For the board of directors to approve the loan, a number of very critical issues then arise. First, under the rules of the ECOWAS Bank, when you make an application for money, there are a lot of documents you need to submit. Those documents are to facilitate due diligence. Mining is a special category across the world in all banking jurisdictions especially in the respect of multilateral development banks, such as ECOWAS Bank. Why? Because often the environmental, social, and governance standards are very, very, very high. So you have to do a whole bunch of due diligence, etc. on it. Now, how do you do due diligence when the owner of the assets, who is the one who has all the information and the likes of it, is not participating? Who are you asking critical questions and the likes of it? Unless you are part of a scheme to rip off the mine from the owners, and therefore you don't think the owners are relevant. You only deal with the acquirer. It's a very strange due diligence approach. And because of that strange due diligence approach, we determined that this was a matter in respect of our ongoing mandate to investigate multilateral development banks, which we've been doing for a very long time in this country. So the ECOWAS Bank angle, the event that was staged to allow ECOWAS Bank to make this announcement in a live dispute was so critical to us from a point of view of, the politics of it, that we thought we had to intervene. As I've tried to explain, when EBIT says that the board of directors of EBIT has approved the deal, that can only be at the end of a very long trail of processes. Typically in a bank like that, you have management, staff, even sometimes even junior officers, then it gets to management. You have committees, risk committees. The management itself has risk committees, credit committees, investment committees. While those committees have done their work, etc., they present a memorandum that goes to the board of directors, which has another committee, the risk and credit committee in the case of ECOWAS Bank. They do further evaluation, and then it goes to the whole board, which then does an approval. So you are telling me that despite all the information that has now surfaced, all those procedures went through ECOWAS Bank to the point where ECOWAS Bank was then convinced that they had to issue this statement claiming the acquisition had happened. Well, we now know the acquisition has not happened because the shareholders have not sold. If this was not the kind of thing that a researcher who has an interest in multilateral development banks and has written extensively, my current visiting senior fellowship at ODI, that's been one of the first set of things that I've written about World Bank standards, IFC, etc., etc. You have a situation with mineral resources where CSOs are required to be at the table, and I have done extensive commentary on mining matters in this country, Ake, Tallow, Atlantic Lithium, etc. Given this set of circumstances, how possible could I have been quiet? It's not possible to be quiet. Everything about this deal touches on extreme public interest. So now we'll start to tackle the disinformation that has been allowed to cloud the key issues. The first myth is that the investors have been sitting on the assets since 1992, which was in the Engineers and Planners press release, if you read it. Is it true or not? So here is the history. The people that are currently in a tussle with EMP are not the people who discovered the resource. They are not the people who started the process. Long ago in early 90s, in 1992, BHP did some investigation, and somewhere in the Wa-Lora enclave, they discovered a deposit called Kunche. So very, very long time ago. And then they didn't go ahead with it. It wasn't commercially viable enough. About 6 years thereabout, a company called Ashanti IM Gold then rediscovered it, and also did some work on it, and decided it was not commercial and didn't go ahead with it. Years later, a gentleman called David Harper, who has been in this country for quite a long time, and this person himself was in the mining services industry, was basically in the construction, mining and construction industry, decided that this was an interesting prospect, and he set up a company in 2004 called Eagle Hand, or thereabouts. I'm not sure exactly the period he set up Eagle Hand. And then through this Eagle Hand, which was registered in Isle of Man, acquired a company in Ghana, or set up another company in Ghana, which was owned by that company. And in the process, we had Azuma Ghana get set up. Why Azuma Ghana? Because this person was a big fan of our great Zunzum warrior, Professor Azuma Nelson. So that is why he named it Azuma Nelson.
Azuma Resources.
Azuma Resources, sorry. Now, the challenge with this is that typically when you want to go into mining, like most people, when you see an entrepreneurial opportunity, you don't have all the money. But mining is particularly capital intensive. So the process, and it takes a long time to actually develop a mine. So the process has been that you start, and as you move along, you bring money in as the project is de-risked, as more gold is found and it's discovered that you can remove that gold at a reasonable cost and sell the gold and make profit. So in that process, they discovered that they didn't obviously have the resource, and they had to find the resources. To do that, they had to go to the Australian stock market, because it's not easy to get banks in Ghana to loan you for a project that takes 20 years. And I'll come to that also in a minute. So usually it's very difficult if you want to get into a large-scale mining to just move in and with all your money and capital just build a mine. It almost never works. The exploration, the prospecting, all of these things take time. And banks don't want 20-year projects, usually in this country. It's not very often. Occasionally, you may get a bank get involved in gold investment, but it's very rare. So they went to the Australian Stock Exchange. And the way that they went was that he had partners who were providing different kind of services to get the thing going, getting the licenses. Some of them had tenements, as what we call it, close by, etc., that you can put together to create value that investors will buy on the stock exchange. So they went to the stock exchange, and like I've explained, there were people in this country like Mr. Paulamoakwata, etc., who were providing sweat equity in the sense that they were doing work for the mine, and because of that, they were getting equity as the thing was listed in the stock exchange. So on the stock exchange, eventually, this is the budget that they put out when they tried to raise the money in Australia, how they were going to use the money. So if you look carefully, you will see that exploration, the different places where they do exploration around Chiripong, Kunche, Nandom, all of those things were listed, administration, etc. And they needed $6 million Australian dollars, which at that time was, maybe $5 million, $4 million, think of the exchange rate that way. So this is the money they needed to get going. But remember, this money will not give you a mine. That's what people don't get. It's not like you go and get 6 million, you get a mine. You have to start building value, and over time, people will come in. So these are early investors. The people that are buying these shares that are issued on the stock market in 2006. So the listing began in 2005, 2006 was completed. These people were buying knowing that there's a lot of risk. So the people that started it, when the shares were distributed, you will see that they got about 1/3 of the shares, right? And then these people, who obviously are all foreigners, sitting in Australia, their goal is to bring enough value to investors, other financial advisors. Some of them are clearly working for sweat equity. So these shares were issued to a corporate advisor who has links, etc., etc. And once you've distributed and broken it all down, you get to 62.5 million shares. And the people that started the whole thing, they are getting 21 million shares, about 1/3 of the company. So this is David Harper and all his friends in Ghana, etc., who came together. So this is the original prospectus that was issued. And this was in 2006. So all the way through up to 2006, this is the first time that Azuma comes into the picture. But Azuma under this ownership. Azuma then continues onwards to do more discoveries. So remember that when they started, they had only Kunche confirmed. They discovered Bekpong. They then do a deal with a company called Crew Gold. And Crew Gold also was another struggling mine company. So Crew Gold decided that instead of continue to struggle, whether they should team up with these people and get shares in the company. So Crew Gold brings Julie and Jenny Josephine, which is their own discoveries that they had. Why are they agglomerating the discoveries?
Those from Singapore?
No, we are not there yet.
Okay.
So what is interesting, people don't realize, is that why are they doing all this agglomeration? The key principle of gold mining, or any mining really, is that if you're going to do a commercial mine, particularly a large-scale commercial mine, you need enough gold for it to be worthwhile. Because the investment to do gold mining properly is so capital intensive, hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes, that if the mine is not very big, what does the big mine mean? It means that the deposit area, thousands of kilometers, and then the actual mine that does the processing, significant enough to process that volume. So you need a large expanse, maybe 1,000 kilometers square, etc., etc. That large expanse and the rest of it, if you have only a small set of deposits, sometimes not enough. So you are doing your best to increase the volume. Why? Because when you then start doing 100,000 ounces a year, you want a mine life of about 7, 8 to maybe 12 years, etc., which is what investors want to see, because then they can get their rate of return. So this is all that is going on. Then somewhere around 2014, they start to increase. So if you look at this point, it started around 220,000 ounces of indicated and inferred resources somewhere in the 90s. By the time they took over, it had increased to about 500,000 based on everything that they knew. By 2010, just before 2010, it had gone to about 1 million. So they are discovering more gold. By 2013, it had gone to almost 2 million resources. What is a resource? A resource simply means that the gold is there, but you don't know if it's economical fully to remove it. When you know it's economical to remove it, we call it a reserve. So you are defining the reserve, and by this point, you now have some confidence to define a reserve, which at that time was about 600,000 ounces. You can see that by the time Ibaira, which is the current company that is in dispute with EMP, by the time they joined in 2017, the defined reserve was 600,000 ounces. This is a very important number because I'll come back to it. So first myth that we've dispelled is that they didn't come in 1992. These companies were trying to find more gold to make it commercially viable. These guys invest in 2017. They invest in 2017, and soon thereafter, the resource goes up to about 2.5 million ounces. And then around 2019, the reserve, which is the one that you are confident you can get, is about 1 million ounces. That means, therefore, that if you produce 100,000 ounces, which today, 100,000 ounces today, a year, today is about $330 million. You can do that for 10 years. So an investor now looks at that calculation, okay, then I can invest 200 and something million. You look at some of your expenses and the rest of the processing and all of that, and maybe you get a 20% return every year for about 10 years. Then I get my return back. 2020, they fully acquired it. So when they came in 2017, they invested part of the money to get the project still going, finding more gold, getting all the alliances and all of that work. And then 2020, they go to the stock market in Australia and they do a takeover. They buy all the shares that I told you were issued in 2006. So it's basically 14 years later that this company now becomes the full owner of Azuma Resources. And this company is called Ibaira Capital, which I'll come into in a minute. Right. They set up a special company.
Primary investor,
that's the primary investor.
It's a fund of the business.
It's a fund.
All right.
So Ibaira sets up a special purpose vehicle called Ibaira. Ibaira Capital Group sets up a special purpose vehicle called Ibaira to acquire all the assets of the Australian company, which owns Azuma Ghana. But that Australian company that owns Azuma Ghana didn't own Azuma Ghana alone. As I've told you, there are other people that had come in and the rest of it. So by that time, they set up another fund called IGIC, IGIC, based in Singapore, which then took the rest of the assets, the rest of the shares, so that this company, Ibaira, now owns 100%. So when you see IGIC, when you see Azuma Resources Australia, as the shareholders of the Ghana entity, know that Ibaira owns both of them.
That's right.
And then there were other projects, as I've told you, it's all about skills. You are looking for projects all the time. So there were other projects we call the Sankofa Gold Prospect, which were owned by 2 other different companies.
And Sankofa is part of this particular agreement.
It's part of this particular agreement.
It's part of. It's not only the black vote.
It's not only the black vote.
Right.
And so the 2 companies are Upwest and Phoenix. And Upwest and Phoenix, as I'll show you in a minute, were also owned by Ibaira.